How could a simple desire for motherhood turn into a nightmare that shocked an entire nation? This is the tragic story of Bobbie Jo Stinnett, a young woman full of life, love, and anticipation, whose future was brutally cut short in December 2004. The events leading up to her death and the shocking details that emerged afterward left the small town of Skidmore, Missouri, reeling and forever changed. Bobbie Jo Stinnett was just 23 years old, living what seemed to be an idyllic life in Skidmore. Married to her high school sweetheart, Zeb Stinnett, the couple was eagerly awaiting the birth of their first child. They were living the kind of life many young couples dream of, a quiet, peaceful existence in a close-knit community, surrounded by family and friends who loved them dearly. Bobbie Jo was well-known and well-liked in Skidmore. She had a deep passion for animals, particularly for breeding rat terriers, a hobby that connected her to a wide network of fellow enthusiasts through online forums. One of the people she connected with online was a woman named Lisa Montgomery, though Bobbie Jo knew her by the alias Darlene Fisher. To most people who knew Lisa, she appeared to be an average woman living in Melbourne, Kansas, married with children, and just trying to get by like everyone else. But behind the scenes, Lisa Montgomery's life was a ticking time bomb of lies, desperation, and deep psychological issues. Lisa had a history that was as tragic as it was disturbing. She grew up in a highly abusive household, where she endured unimaginable trauma, including physical, emotional, and sexual abuse at the hands of her mother and the men her mother brought into their lives. This childhood left deep scars on Lisa, leading to severe mental health problems as she grew older. Lisa's mental health issues weren't just the result of her abusive childhood, they were compounded by her adult experiences. She suffered from bipolar disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, and complex post-traumatic stress disorder, CPTSD. These disorders contributed to her disconnection from reality and her compulsive lying about pregnancies. Her doctors had noted that she had dissociative disorders, which often made her retreat into a world where her lies became her reality. Lisa's adult life was no less chaotic. She had been married twice, had 4 children, and had undergone sterilization after the birth of her youngest child. Despite this, Lisa frequently lied about being pregnant. These false pregnancies were her way of seeking attention, sympathy, and perhaps, in her mind, a sense of worth that she never truly felt. Lisa's deception ran deep. She went as far as to buy a fake pregnancy belly, searched extensively online about childbirth, and concocted elaborate stories about her supposed pregnancies. Her lies were not only told to her husband, Kevin Montgomery, but also to friends, family, and even strangers she met online. Kevin Montgomery, Lisa's husband, was unaware of many of the troubles that plagued Lisa, including her sterilization. He believed her claims of pregnancy and was likely one of the many who had been deceived by Lisa's carefully crafted facade. Her desperation to maintain her charade of pregnancy eventually drove her to a dark place, where she began to plot how to steal someone else's baby to complete the illusion. In her search for a victim, Lisa found Bobbie Jo Stinnett online. Bobbie Jo was everything Lisa wanted to be: happy, pregnant, and living a life filled with love and hope for the future. The two women connected through a shared interest in breeding rat terriers. Lisa, using the alias Darlene Fisher, began communicating with Bobbie Jo, expressing interest in buying one of her puppies. Over time, the relationship between the two women grew, at least on the surface. To Bobbie Jo, Lisa seemed like just another dog lover, excited to meet and discuss their shared passion. But for Lisa, this relationship was the key to carrying out her terrifying plan. As the weeks went by, Lisa's obsession with Bobbie Jo and her unborn child grew. She meticulously planned every detail, researching how to perform a cesarean section and making sure she had everything she needed to carry out her plan. Lisa's planning was meticulous. She didn't just randomly choose Bobbie Jo. She had been monitoring her for weeks. Lisa knew exactly when Bobbie Jo was due, and she carefully chose the day to strike, when Bobbie Jo would likely be home alone. On December 16, 2004, Lisa Montgomery set her plan into motion. She contacted Bobbie Jo and arranged to meet her at her home in Skidmore, under the pretense of picking up the puppy she had expressed interest in. Bobbie Jo, who was 8 months pregnant at the time, had no reason to suspect anything was wrong. She welcomed Lisa into her home with a smile, completely unaware of the danger that stood before her. Once inside, the situation took a horrifying turn. Lisa Montgomery, driven by her delusion and desperation, attacked Bobbie Jo from behind. She wrapped a rope around Bobbie Jo's neck and began to strangle her. Evidence later showed that Bobbie Jo fought back fiercely, but she was no match for Lisa's strength and determination. Bobbie Jo was soon overpowered, and Lisa's plan entered its most gruesome phase. With chilling precision, Lisa retrieved a kitchen knife she had brought with her and began to perform a crude cesarean section on Bobbie Jo. Despite being gravely injured, Bobbie Jo was still alive as Lisa cut into her abdomen, extracting the baby girl from her womb. Bobbie Jo's suffering was immense, and she died shortly after, alone and in agony, on the floor of her own home. Lisa fled the scene with the newborn baby, leaving Bobbie Jo's lifeless body behind. She drove back to Kansas, where she proudly showed off the baby as her own, telling everyone that she had just given birth. Lisa's husband, Kevin, completely unaware of the horrors his wife had committed, believed her story and supported her as they presented the baby to friends and family. Lisa's behavior post-murder showed her deep disconnect from reality. She was seen shopping at a Walmart with the stolen baby, acting as if nothing had happened, and even called her husband to tell him she had given birth. Lisa's actions indicated a complete immersion in her delusion, where she believed, at least momentarily, that the baby was truly hers. Back in Skidmore, Bobbie Jo's mother arrived at her daughter's home just an hour later. What she found was a scene straight out of a nightmare, her daughter lying in a pool of blood, brutally murdered, and the baby she had been so excited to meet nowhere to be found. The discovery of Bobbie Jo's body sent shockwaves through the community and sparked a nationwide manhunt for the missing baby and her killer. The town of Skidmore, Missouri was already known for its violent past, most notably the unsolved 1981 murder of Ken Rex McElroy, a notorious bully shot dead in broad daylight with dozens of witnesses, none of whom ever testified against the killers. Bobbie Jo's murder added to the town's tragic history. For a small, close-knit community, this crime was particularly devastating because it involved one of their own, a young, pregnant woman who was loved by everyone who knew her. The shock and horror of such a brutal crime occurring in their quiet town left the residents traumatized. The FBI quickly got involved, and it didn't take long for them to zero in on Lisa Montgomery as a suspect. They traced the online interactions between Bobbie Jo and Darlene Fisher and identified Lisa as the person behind the alias. Witnesses in Skidmore had seen Lisa's car near Bobbie Jo's home on the day of the murder, and this, combined with the digital evidence, led authorities to Lisa's door. On December 17, 2004, less than 24 hours after the murder, the FBI arrived at Lisa Montgomery's home in Melbourne, Kansas. Inside, they found Lisa cradling the newborn baby, whom she had already begun calling her own. The baby, miraculously unharmed, was taken from Lisa and safely returned to Zeb Stinnett, the child's rightful father. The town of Skidmore was shattered by the loss of Bobbie Jo, but there was some solace in the fact that her baby girl had survived. Lisa Montgomery was arrested and charged with the kidnapping and murder of Bobbie Jo Stinnett. Her trial was a media sensation, as the gruesome details of the case were revealed to the public. During her trial, Lisa's defense team argued that she suffered from severe mental illness, pointing to her history of abuse and psychological disorders. They claimed that Lisa was in a psychotic state at the time of the murder and was unable to distinguish between right and wrong. However, the prosecution focused on the premeditated nature of the crime. They highlighted how Lisa had planned the murder, researched childbirth, and tricked Bobbie Jo into letting her into the house. The jury saw through the defense's argument and found Lisa guilty of kidnapping resulting in death. She was sentenced to death in 2007. Lisa Montgomery's mental health continued to be a contentious issue during her time on death row. Her legal team appealed her sentence multiple times, arguing that her execution would be a miscarriage of justice due to her mental state. Numerous appeals were filed on her behalf, arguing that her execution would violate constitutional protections due to her mental state. Several organizations, including the American Civil Liberties Union, ACLU, and the National Alliance on Mental Illness, NAMI, called for her sentence to be commuted to life imprisonment. Despite these efforts, Lisa Montgomery was executed by lethal injection on January 13, 2021, becoming the first woman to be executed by the federal government since 1953. The case also highlighted the dangers of online interactions, where trust can be easily manipulated. Bobbie Jo's contact with Lisa began innocuously enough through a shared interest in dog breeding, but it quickly turned deadly. This serves as a reminder of the potential risks of online communication, where people can hide their true identities and intentions. Additionally, the case drew attention to the broader issues of mental health care in the United States, particularly for those with severe trauma histories. Lisa's life could have potentially taken a different path had she received appropriate psychological care earlier in life. Her untreated mental illnesses ultimately led to a tragedy that could have been prevented with proper intervention. For the Stinnett family, the aftermath of the crime was devastating. Zeb Stinnett, who lost his wife and nearly lost his daughter, was left to raise his child alone while dealing with the trauma of such a horrific event. Victoria Jo Stinnett, Bobbie Jo's daughter, has grown up knowing the tragic circumstances of her birth, which has undoubtedly shaped her life in profound ways. The Stinnett family continues to cope with the loss even as they try to move forward.